Welcome to Enlightened Omnivore, the monthly podcast that serves up a delicious mix of food, sustainability, and travel. I'm your host, Steve Sabaker, here to explore the wonders of mindful eating. Join me each month as I dig into the stories behind our food system, discover new ways to live sustainably, and embark on culinary adventures around the globe or right in your very own kitchen. Get ready to expand your palate and your mind, one bite at a time. All right. Today on Enlightened Omnivore, we're venturing into the wild with Hank Shaw, a James Beard Award-winning author, chef, and one of the most insightful voices on hunting, foraging, and cooking from the land. Hank has spent his career showing us that food isn't just something we buy, it's something we participate in. Through his website, Hunter, Angler, Gardener, Cook, and his many books, including his newest cookbook, Borderlands, Hank has redefined how we think about sustainable eating and the deep connections between people, place, and plate. Interestingly enough, Hank came to hunting as an adult and wasn't always a chef. He's had a lengthy career as a journalist as well, and was political bureau chief in Stockton, California, not far from where I grew up. So I'm very excited to welcome Hank Shaw to the show. Thanks for being here, Hank.
Thanks for having me on.
So you've worn many hats in your life: journalist, chef, author, hunter. Could you share a little bit about how those paths have crossed over the years?
I mean, the short answer is we're all the sum of our choices. And it's not like I had a grand master plan for how my life was going to go, but this is kind of where I'm at. I think the first hat of what you mentioned was I started as a cook. I was never a grand chef. I'm always sort of a little intimidated when I meet, people like Michelin-starred chefs or whatever, because I was never that. I was always either a line cook or a sous chef, and I was always the guy who would be like, yes, chef, to those people. And so that's been kind of an interesting transition. But I did that when I was young, and then I transitioned into being a newspaper reporter, and I actually covered politics for quite some time, including the politics of agriculture and water in California.
Pretty important there in Stockton.
Yes. Yeah. Ag and water are the lifeblood of the Central Valley, which is where I lived for 19 years. And so I have that kind of experience behind me. I actually started hunting before I moved to California, though. It's about 25 years ago now. And I started here where I live in Minnesota, in St. Paul. And it's been quite the journey. It's been a really interesting evolution in sort of how I look at things and how I eat and how I treat meat in general. So that's been pretty impressive.
I want to talk a little bit about that because you came hunting in your 30s?
When I was 30, yeah.
And you didn't have family who hunted before, where you were
not even close.
So tell me, what was the genesis story there? Like, why did you decide to hunt, and how'd you go about learning?
I've always been a fisherman, and I've always been a gatherer. So I've had the way I put it is I've always had those two legs in the stool. And I was fishing with my buddy Chris Niskanen, and Chris lives here in Minnesota, and we were both working for the St. Paul Pioneer Press at the time. And he was the outdoor writer, and so we would go, fishing all the time. And then summer kind of turned to fall, and he's like, "Hey, it's time to go hunting." And like, well, I don't really hunt. And he's like, "Well, I'll take you out if you want." And the idea had been kind of ruminating in my head for a bit. And I decided, let's give it a go. And the first hunt was for pheasants near Aberdeen, South Dakota. And I couldn't hit anything. Turns out shotgunning is a lot more difficult than most people think, including me at the time. The common misperception about shotgunning is that you just point it somewhere near whatever it is that you're going to shoot at, and then it'll hit it because there's so many pellets, and that is 1,000% not true. Shotgunning is actually much more difficult to master than rifle shooting. So needless to say, I missed everything. But I was really, really fascinated by my friend Chris's ability to read land. I could read water. I'd been on the water my whole life, and I could read currents. I knew about structure underneath. I knew about seasons and tides and all that sort of thing. And there's a lot more to being an angler than, dropping a rod and reel with some bait down. And very much there's a lot more to being a hunter than pulling a trigger. So that became really exciting. And he had been buttering me up too. So he gave me, here's some venison, here's a duck, and one a pheasant. And it's a little bit like, the old drug dealers think, first one's free, right? And and so I says, because I had come to this as a cook, I knew how to cook those things from kind of a classical French perspective. And if you looked at all of my very oldest recipes, are all very classical in French or Italian. And so that kind of started it. And then as I got a little bit better and a little bit better, somewhere around 2004 or 2005, I decided, I wonder if I can not buy meat. And I laugh at it now because I used to put like spreadsheets and like, we need this many pounds of that and that many pounds of that. And it becomes ridiculous when you're good at this. I don't hunt much anymore because I get everything that I need in a few hunts.
Wow.
I live by myself. So I don't have to, I shoot a deer or two every year. I shoot a bunch of pheasants. I shoot, a dozen ducks, maybe 2 dozen. I hunt to eat, and I hunt what I eat, and I know how much I'm going to eat in any given day, in any given month. So I've gotten very, very good at not killing when I don't have to.
I got a family of 5, so I'd have to do a lot of
Different
hunting.
situation.
And my kids can eat a lot, but I really appreciate that. I mean, that's what I came to realize when I first came to hunting. I've got 5 mouths to feed. Gosh, could I provide for my whole family? I love that thought. And that kind of was one of the first things that brought me to hunting. I came to hunting much later in life than you, just about 2 years ago, really. And I'm 47. So, and I don't have a tradition in my family either, although I grew up in a rural area. So all of my friends hunted and fished and were very in tune with that season of the year and had, lots of experience with it. But I was, as a young guy, really uncomfortable with it. And I was curious. I mean, I'm kind of a nerdy guy, and I get a sense that you can geek out on things. Was it hard finding your tribe or fellow hunters?
Not really, because I spent 18 years as a newspaper reporter. And when you spend that many years talking to everybody from every facet of life, every class, every gender, rural and urban, every ethnic group, you name it. When you do that for a living for that long, it's not really hard to talk to people. And hunters always talk to each other. And when it comes to the outdoors, for the most part, it's been my experience that people leave their politics at the door, that they basically talk about the outdoors when they're with other outdoors people. And then that becomes our common ground. And sure, if we do start talking about politics, we may disagree fairly heartily. But that's not really why we're there. We're there to chase pheasants or hunt ducks or make some sausage or whatever. And so that compartmentalizing has become, it's a thing. It's not new. It's been going on for as long as I've been hunting it. That's 25 years. So no, it's actually not very difficult at all to find people who do what you do, like doing what you do, and can give you insight and knowledge and things that you didn't know, whether it's in the field or actually, in the kitchen. I've learned a lot from just regular folks.
Yeah, where did you cook? I'm curious. What kind of restaurants did you cook in?
I cooked in restaurants, mostly in Madison, Wisconsin, when I was in graduate school. I worked my first restaurant that I worked at was an Ethiopian restaurant, and I started as a dishwasher and worked my way up to sous chef. And that was a crazy experience. It was very formative to learn that cuisine, to really kind of know what it's like to be a minority, because I was the only white guy in the staff, and most of our regulars were from Africa. Most of these regulars would come in because they all went to the University of Wisconsin as like engineers or agronomists or whatever. And this became kind of the watering hole for African expats all over town. So it became this really interesting African melting pot. And I learned a lot from just hanging out at the bar after the service.
I'm curious, had you had Ethiopian food before you started working there?
Never. Not once.
Was there a crash course in the flavor profiles, or was it just yes, chef, head down, chopping onions and washing plates?
Oh yeah, well, you learn. I mean, come on, man. You cook the same food every day for even 2 weeks, and you're gonna know it. And I worked there for almost 2 years, so
Well, switching gears back to hunting, I missed out on a lot of hunting experiences coming to it later in life. Are there things you value about coming to hunting as an adult, or do you just wish you'd started earlier so you could have more seasons behind you?
I actually never really have ever thought about one or the other. It just sort of is. I've never thought about what if I started hunting as a child. Weirdly, now that because it's the first time ever anybody's ever asked me that question, and I've never given it any thought. So no, I mean it's just what I do, and I think the thing I've gotten out of starting hunting as an adult is especially it's really more related to my cooking. Is I don't have any preconceived notions about what's good and what's not good. I don't have any preconceived this is how you cook it. The greatest part of the hunting community, and really probably everywhere, but certainly North America, is there's a hideboundness about the food that comes out of the hunt. And the stereotypes of cream of mushroom soup or wrap it in bacon or that sort of stuff,
Or deep fry it?
or deep fry it. All of those can be good in their own season and time. But I think the duck book was really the greatest example of that. I wrote that duck book in 2013 because I could not stand how many hunters were just basically ruining their ducks because they didn't have the insight or the knowledge of domestic duck cooked by people who like domestic ducks.
Yeah.
Because duck's not really a thing in the American supermarket. I mean, yes, you can buy them, but you don't have Friday night duck fries or whatever. It's not a common part of the cuisine like it is in France or China or even Spain. So the methods of cooking duck that I drew from, especially in France, blew people away because they're like, "What is this?" I'm like, "Yeah, guess what? It's a red meat bird. You cook a red meat bird like you cook a steak.
Yep.
You don't cook a red meat bird the way you cook a chicken." And then that very sentence like exploded their minds. But once you sort of realize that, then it opens up an entire world. And I can't tell you how much really gratifying correspondence I've had from readers of that book and of the website of like, I hate it. I love hunting ducks. I hated cooking them until I found you. And that's worth the price of admission.
It's such a great point. And it's funny you talk about duck. Every summer I go to France. My wife's family is French, and we visit her aunt. And that's one of my favorite things to do is to go to the grocery store and see there's like 20 different kinds of duck you can buy at a grocery store or butcher shop. And it is such a different experience once you know how to cook it. What's your favorite way to cook duck?
I think if I were to come home with a limited birds, especially if they're nice fat birds, I'm gonna probably break them down. I'm gonna make a duck soup with the carcasses and wings and scrap. I'm gonna either slow roast or confit the legs, and I'm gonna use the breast meat kind of like a steak.
Yep. That's we would sell whole ducks at the butcher shop, and I would always tell folks, don't roast them. Don't roast them whole. Let's
They're
break
not
them
bad
down.
roasted. I like roasted duck. Like
It's doable for sure, but I think there's a better mousetrap if you break them down and everybody do exactly what Hank just said. That would be my recommendation. And you get 3 meals out of it.
You do.
Duck in the US is not cheap unless you're shooting it yourself.
Well, yeah, that's what I would say though. That's what my hesitation, what you're hearing is when you have let's say you have a skinny mallard that isn't very fat, that's actually going to be better roasted whole. And the method is hot and fast. It's 450 degrees for 15 to 20 minutes. And that gets you a much better result than skinny legs and no fat underneath the breast meat. So that's the other thing that you have to do. And I think you actually mentioned this before we went on the air is to embrace chaos if you want to be a good wild game cook or fish cook for that matter.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about that because you've been quoted a few times calling cooking wild food is embracing chaos. So tell me more what you mean by that.
It's beautiful because you're dealing with something real. You're dealing with something that has terroir. You're dealing with something that is variable. So put it this way. A big northern mallard that I would shoot, say, in North Dakota is going to be an entirely different eating experience from a skinny mallard that's in the middle of the migration shot, say, in Missouri. Here's an even better example. So in California, we have lots of different microclimates. So one day I had a party, and at this party, we had 5 very different mallards. They all had fat. One was from the Sierra Nevada foothills and had been eating acorns. One was from the Sacramento Valley and had been eating rice. One was from the grasslands and it had been eating natural forage. And one was from Klamath up north on the Oregon border. And then one was from the Delta and had been mostly eating corn. So I cooked all of the duck breasts in exactly the same way. And I was the only one who knew which was which. And so I sliced them, salted them, and peppered them, and they were all cooked medium rare. And I gave everybody cards, like which one do you like the best? And so there were noticeable differences between all of the different birds because it had the skin and fat on them. And the short version is the natural forage in the grasslands one, followed by the acorn mallard, followed by the rice mallard. The
Wow.
corn mallard, everyone says, was fine, but boring, because I thought was interesting.
I think the same thing about beef. So
Yeah, but the subtleties in beef are subtle. I mean,
Yes.
because they're herbivores.
Yeah.
When you have an omnivore like a duck or a pig or a bear, those things can be really profound. I think the other piece to the chaos of it is how old's your bird? You don't know. I don't know. This matters. I have stewed goose legs, and geese can range up to 30 years old, sometimes even beyond that. And do you think a goose leg from a goose that was 30 years old is going to cook in the same time as a goose that was young of the year? No, it is not.
Yeah.
So you've got diet, you've got region, you've got species. So what species of duck did you shoot? They're not all mallards, you know. Is your deer young or old? Is your deer in rut or eating, GMO corn, or is it eating acorns, or what is it eating? So all of these things play into the cook's palate, and you could really result in beautiful, just absolutely singular dishes that are not repeatable. And that's a great thing because you've just recreated time and space on a plate.
And it's so true because we've really become used to consistency. As Americans, especially, consistency is almost more important than taste or quality. And so I love your point about that. I mean, we would see that all the time in our heritage breed and our, small scale ranching meats that we would get from, for our butcher shop because they're every season's different, and the animal is eating in a different part of the pasture. And so, to think about that variability is actually a beautiful thing that creates a unique experience. I love what you said.
Well, even with farm stuff, I mean, think about it. You use an acorn-finished hog to make hams. You use a grain-finished hog to make salami because the fat's radically different.
Absolutely. I love how you incorporate native plants too. You mentioned that you were a gatherer before you were a hunter. What are some of the ingredients you like working with? And can you tell us kind of, how you go about finding them?
I mean, too numerous to count. But a good case in point is where I used to live in Sacramento. The native people, the Miwok there, they on the average ate something on the order of 75 to 100 different species of plants every year. And the average American eats about 9.
Wow.
And I eat somewhere between 75 and 100 every year. So the plants that I'm really interested in, there are a few that kind of transcend time and place. One would be nettles. Nettles are really important to me. I have of Scottish descent, and they're a big thing in Scottish food. And they're always sort of the first tonic green to come out in the very early spring. So I'll gather them all the way through Memorial Day here in Minnesota and blanch and vacuum seal them and freeze them because I want to be able to eat nettles in the wintertime. But there's other greens like lamb's quarters. It's another one that fills that role. Amaranth fills that role. There's a few others. Mushrooms. I pick a lot of wild mushrooms. I like that a lot.
Up there in Minnesota, what are some of the most popular mushrooms?
All the ones you think, chanterelles, morels, porcini. Porcini are a little bit less common here than they are in the West, but they're here. In fact, tap wood wherever it is around you right now, everyone, because if we continue to get rain here in the Twin Cities and we continue to have this weird warm October where, knock on wood, we don't have frost warning until Halloween. So if that happens, we're going to get a porcini flesh with no bugs in it, and that's doesn't happen very often. And so that's a magical thing.
Do you get any black trumpet mushrooms up?
Yes, we do up north.
Oh, I am very jealous of that. That's one thing we don't get down here in Southern California.
Not in SoCal, but you'll get them in NorCal.
I know. I've got a good friend who's been on the podcast that takes a group up to Mendocino every year.
Yeah, Mendo's a good spot for them, and you can get them all the way into March.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, hopefully this year I'll get up there, but I enjoy a good mushroom hunt as well. So it's fantastic. You do a lot of hunting in the South and Southwest, or have in the past. Like I'm a big desert guy. What are some of the wild foods or native foods that you've incorporated from your Southwestern hunts?
Oh God, just too numerous to count. I mean, the Sonoran Desert's crazy because if you know what you're doing, you can get fat in the desert. Like there's mesquite, there's wolfberries, there's cactus fruit, there's cholla buds, there's agarita berries. And once you get into Texas, there's pine nuts. There is a native oak that has acorns that don't have really tannins in them, so you can just roast and eat them.
Really?
Yeah, the emery oak.
That's in Texas?
No, the emery oak is in Sonora. So it's in
Okay.
Sonora and Arizona.
Arizona, yeah. I listened to one of your podcasts not too long ago that you were on talking about the do's and don'ts of dove hunting. I'm curious, would you say you're more an upland bird hunter or a bird hunter or an angler, or what would you say is kind of where you spend your most time?
I'll rephrase the question if that's okay.
Sure.
Because usually the question that I get is, if you could do only one of those things, what would you do? And I think the answer is fish, because I've been an angler since before I could walk. And the diversity of fishing in the North America, the flavors, and I think the other piece to it is there's an intensity to hunting that I love dearly. It really puts you in the moment. But there's also an ease and a conviviality of fishing that most hunting doesn't have. Now, dove hunting does have it because it's not like you really have to hide anywhere or not talk when you're dove hunting. But that's the exception that proves the rule. So when it comes to hunting, I think upland hunting is probably my favorite. I hunt deer all the time, but for me, I hunt deer because I want deer in my freezer. And yes, I've shot some nice bucks, but it's not like I'm not gonna shoot 7 deer a year because I'm looking for that big one giant or whatever. I shoot deer because I want to eat deer. Bird hunting is the thing that gives me a lot of joy because it's active. In upland bird hunting, you're walking all the time. So even when it's cold out, it's not really that cold. I did really dearly love duck hunting in California because it was kind of civilized in the sense that normally the coldest it would be around freezing. Here in Minnesota, it's not uncommon to hunt geese when it's 20 below. And I don't know, man. Like, I like geese. I don't know that I like geese that much.
I was gonna say, yeah, you gotta really like geese to do that. Yeah, we're a little spoiled here in California. Although dove hunting where I am is definitely a full contact sport. They are few and far between in my area, and it's a lot of mountainous. It's almost like chucker hunting. I mean, I'm stomping around in the woods, or well, in the desert. We do have some trees, but not a lot. But it's a high desert and it's relatively wooded. The numbers are not very high, so you got to really.
Okay.
And I don't have a dog. Like, yeah, I don't think you don't use a dog either, do you?
No.
Yeah, so I am the dog. So I do a lot of steps on those days. What do you think is the number one misconception that non-hunters have of hunters?
That we don't eat what we kill. That's, I think, by far the number one thing is the default question that most of us get are, so, hey, I'm a hunter. And the default question, do you eat it? The fact that they have to ask that a non-hunter has to constantly ask that, means that the hunting community has done a very poor job of communicating what it is that we actually do. The percentage of hunters who don't eat what they kill is minimal. I mean, you could have an argument that it's not the highest and best use of said animal because they're making jerky or grinding it, but that's really a question of aesthetics. I mean, they're eating it. That's the point. And I think many, many non-hunters are surprised that, okay, well then that's fine. Which is funny because because it just all sort of like, well, duh. What do you think we're doing, man?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
I'm not blasting away at birds just to like go, die, bird. That's not what we do. We're there to eat birds.
And it's not cheap to hunt anymore. So,
No.
And people think it's free, and it's like, well, I'm not going to go out there and do this if I'm not going to bring something home for for my efforts.
The ammunition I hunt with for deer is over $2 a shell.
Yeah, and we're now steel shot in California, and it's not cheap either. So, and if you shoot like I do, you use a few extra rounds to get a dove or two. So, I'm getting better though. I'm getting better. What are some resources that adult hunters who are starting out can find to help them meet more hunters and get more dialed into the community?
Yeah, probably backcountry hunters and anglers would be a first place for sure. I'd say the critter clubs, specifically Pheasants and Quail Forever, are very good with adults hunting outreach. Delta Waterfowl is pretty good they're better than Ducks Unlimited for adult hunter outreach. I would say there are a lot of state programs and opportunities for new hunters. California has had them in the past. There's one specifically for women that's national called Becoming an Outdoors Woman, BOW. And that one's a big deal. That's all over the country. There's a group called Hunters of Color, really great for mentoring people who aren't white who want to get into hunting, and virtually all of them are adults.
And I've found that, in a lot of local shooting clubs, or California does have some great workshops that can get you started. But I met my first friends in hunting through the local shooting range. And it's the folks who I really got to know that practice. When they practice learning how to shoot and they're out there committed to getting better, that means that they actually want to, hit their target. They're not just out for once a year to drink beers and, sit on a bucket and hope they hit a dove.
Yeah. I mean, dove hunting is weird like that, but also keep in mind, I've been hunting for 25 years. I don't go to the shotgun range. And it takes me an average of 2 to 3 shells per dove.
And how do you keep sharp?
I'm just good. I'm just good.
Okay.
Good.
All right, Hank, not all of us are as good, but
well, but here's the thing. My point is shoot for 25 years and then come back to me.
Yeah.
That's the thing. And I was at the range a lot when I was at your stage, but I got good and I stayed good. So yes, everyone needs to practice, but at some point you level off. And at some point you're at a really competent level and you don't really lose a lot, especially if you're not trying to stretch. So the guys I know who are still practicing, even though they've been hunting for 10, 20 years, are the ones who are trying to shoot at 400 yards now.
Gotcha.
And they're going to practice that a lot.
Yeah.
Because that's not a normal shot.
Right.
I've done it once. But a 200-yard shot, come on. I can do that drunk.
Well, I'm shooting shotgun mostly myself.
Yeah. So my advice is to practice skeet more than trap.
Yeah.
Practice skeet, get good at skeet, and then, how many years have you been shotgunning?
Just 3.
Yeah, I mean, once you hit the 8 or 10-year mark, you'll have it. Now, the other thing is make sure your shotgun is fitted to you. At the very least, that if it's an auto loader, have the shims put in right so that it fits you well. If it's an over and under or side by side, take it to a stock man and have the stock shaved to fit you.
Let's talk about your newest book, Borderlands. I mean, you've had several fantastic cookbooks, but they were specifically about wild game mostly, I think. This one's a bit different. Why the Southwest?
Because I've done so much of what I do in the Southwest and in Mexico that it was just sort of a natural extension. I mean, I've done a waterfowl book. I've done a small game book. I've done a big game book. I've done a fish book. I've done a book that has a little bit of everything. So my first 5 books were all very topic specific. And there really isn't anything else to cover in the wild food world, with the exception of, say, a foraging or an edible wild plants book. And I didn't do that largely because I have several very good friends who have written very good books that do that. And I don't really want to step on their toes. And I feel it's a matter of respect. Like, they respect, these are good, knowledgeable people who have written great books, and they respect my place in the world of fish and game, and I respect their place in the world of mushrooms and plants. So that kind of led me to think about, well, what else would I do? And like, I loved Mexico in the Southwest for so long, and I've been going there for so long that it just became kind of a natural. That book has a lot of foraging in it. It has a lot of fish and game in it, but it's not, that's not what the book is about. The book is really my love letter to the region. It's a book that I intend to put you there, especially if you've never been there, if you've never been to the border, if you've never been to these parts of Mexico. And chances are you probably haven't. And the subtext to it is really to show you what the border actually looks like, what the people are actually like. There's so much misconception about that region that I thought that not only would this be a really fun book to cook from, but it's a really fun book to learn from.
And again, the book's called Borderlands. It's a beautifully shot book too. I've
Thank
really
you.
enjoyed looking at it. Do you think you get better at writing cookbooks? Like, this is number 6. Is it a skill set? Are there tricks and tips to it? Like, what's surprising about writing your 6th cookbook?
I think because I chose this book to be more than just a cookbook, um, that made the project much more interesting to me. I very easily could have done. It's actually better to explain in Spanish. So this is a libro de gastronomía. This is not a libro de recetas. So there are tons and tons of books that are lists of recipes, and they're very useful. Often with no pictures, often with very minimal context, and they're very useful. I have hundreds and hundreds of them, especially in Spanish, but they don't put you there. And the thing that I've been trying to do with all of my books, and I think I've just gotten better at it, is putting you there, is taking you to a place, and whether it's even just like, this is what it's like to butcher a deer, or this is what you need to listen to when you're cooking a duck breast. I mean, to give you the sensory experience. I think that is a skill set that you have to acquire through experience. And I think you also need to remember that I spent 18 years as a newspaper reporter before I wrote a cookbook. So I know how to write crisp, clean, and clear and fast.
Yeah.
I'm very good at taking complicated subjects and distilling it into paragraphs and prose that people can understand.
I super admire that now that I have a weekly newsletter and I try to write it faster and faster each week. And building that skill, it just takes time. And I'm always impressed with my journalist friends at how succinct and how quick you guys are. Cause you had like hours back in the day to get this stuff.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I covered Al Gore's acceptance speech at the 2000 National Convention in Los Angeles. And my newspaper was in Virginia. And so we were given the rough outline of the speech, but you can't publish off that because he may stray from the script. So I created this kind of skeleton. And I was watching Al Gore give his acceptance speech at the computer, adjusting, rearranging. And so as soon as he finishes it, I hit send up just like in the 1930s, 1940s, and like, sweetheart, get me a rewrite. And so like I dictated the final bits over the phone to make sure that it fit and it was accurate and it would be in the next morning's newspaper 3 hours time difference away. And so yeah, that's probably the most intense deadline I think I've ever had, where I filed a skeleton. They had the length in it, and then I had to dictate quotes within minutes of their press time.
It's shocking how much the internet and instant communications have spoiled us, right? I mean,
Yeah. I mean, this is 25 years ago.
Is there a new food tradition that you're eager to explore next? Are
There is. It's not really a new tradition, but it's one that I really want to explore. I think the first thing that I'm going to do, and this is going to be the interim, next year marks 10 years of Buck Buck Moose. And that book has sold over 100,000 copies. And I am absolutely going to revise it and expand it and make it a better book than it was because I've learned so much over the last 10 years that there's going to be a new Buck Buck Moose for 2026. That's coming for sure imminently. But the next big project I'm working on, so you've read Borderlands, and the next one is going to be Grasslands. And that is going to be the same kind of treatment, that same kind of love letter to the Great Plains. And I'm going to go from the Canadian prairie provinces all the way down to Texas. And again, just like Borderlands, I've spent an enormous amount of time in that region. And I think the coolest thing about this cuisine and this place is finding the hidden gems because the ambient food culture there can be pretty basic and be fairly bad.
I was gonna say Midwestern is not the region I would pick for a cookbook, so I'm intrigued.
Right. And the fact that you said that is exactly why it needs to be done because you're wrong. There is enormous amounts of really beautiful food in the Midwest that is still done. But the thing about it is it's mostly done in people's homes.
Mm-hmm.
So it's very easy to go to Quick Trip and get, a rolling taco. But the really good stuff is there. You just have to know where to look for it. And I love the idea of loving the unloved, of shining a light on a region that people hate on.
Even Midwestern food needs some love.
I mean, there are great books. I mean, Amy Thalen's New Midwestern Table is one of the best cookbooks in the last 10 years. And if you look at it, you'd be like, Jesus, this food's amazing. And then the Nourist Kitchen, which is from Colorado, and she's from Eastern Colorado. And like that's another case where that's Great Plains.
That's Great Plains, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's pretty flat and dry there.
Yeah. So like there are some amazing books out there. And this is my hope for this book, which I don't know when it's gonna be published, maybe in a couple of years, would be to really take you coastal elites to to the Midwest and to the Great Plains and really show you what it looks like.
I love it. Well, definitely check it out when it comes out. It sounds like a good read. You were a political reporter. We talked about that before becoming a food writer.
Alas, yes.
Does that lens shape how you see kind of the politics of land and food and identity today? I mean, you've covered a lot of ground in the US. So how does having been a political reporter help shape how you see the terrain, not just when you're looking for the animals?
Well, I kind of know. I know where I am, and I know what I'm looking at. I know the general flavor of the places that I'm in, and I know how politics works. So I'm familiar with the way that big agriculture or big water operates in rural places where we hunt and fish, and it's often detrimental. It's often not a good thing. And so I basically see the political battles in the backdrop of the places that I'm in because I know what they are.
What do you think are some of the biggest challenges right now politically for hunters?
Public land. Public land is huge. And then beyond that, conservation reserve program. So CRP is not public. CRP is, so if I've got 1,000 acres, really honestly, chances are only about 800 of them, if I'm lucky, are good to grow corn and soybeans and wheat and such on. There's probably 200 of those 1,000 acres. It's kind of sketch. And so historically, the Conservation Reserve Program has been, I'll get a little bit of a kickback from the government to not plant in marginal areas and let it go native and let it, buffers near streams or habitat corridors or native prairie plantings and that kind of thing. Those programs are so unbelievably beneficial to everything from pollinators to the birds that we hunt to birds that we don't hunt to mammals and all these things. And that plus public land, that's the lifeblood of hunting, fishing, and foraging in the United States. all you have to do is look at Iowa. Iowa has almost no public land, and they have tile drained the whole state so that you don't have wetlands and you don't have conservation reserve program. Now it's getting a little better, but generally speaking, that state is there's not a lot of wilderness or wildness or anything that's not heavily managed in that state. And that used to be entirely short grass and tall grass prairie.
That's right. Yeah. Well, they just put all the pigs indoors, and they're they're growing just a lot of corn. So, yeah, it's challenging. My wife and I, we drove across country during COVID with our kids, and I remember very distinctly driving through Iowa and Kansas, and there was corn, obviously, for as far as you could see, and little signs at the end of each field telling you what seed stock they were using and what proprietary IP GMO corn they were growing.
Yeah, Bayer crop science.
But then the moment we crossed the border into Colorado, I knew we'd crossed the border because the windshield was immediately splattered with bugs, and there were birds in the air, and there was roadkill on the road. For the previous several hundred miles, there was no life other than what was growing intentionally in the fields. Everything else had been managed or had been destroyed. And I mean, I kid you not, literally, we had to stop at the next gas station to clean the windshield. And for the previous 7 hours of driving, we had no problems at all. So I was really struck physically by the experience of just how engineered the land is in some of the country and how detrimental that is to the natural flora and fauna.
Yeah, I mean, we need to grow. I mean, the other thing is, I'm sorry, we don't need this much corn and soybeans. Like, the vast majority of the soybean crop goes to China, except now it's not.
But not right now, but yeah, historically.
And then we don't need all this corn, ladies and gentlemen. Like, virtually all of the corn that you see is not eaten by anyone. It's turned into ethanol or industrial products. And like, you can barely eat it. I mean, technically it's edible, but it sucks. Like, I've tried it. It's disgusting. It's like chalk. So this is all at the slave auction of growth, like constant growth, constant growth, constant growth. And it used to be the holy trinity in the Midwest. It used to be corn, beans, and soybeans. And so corn takes, wheat's kind of in the middle, and then soybeans give back. And so but wheat has kind of gone away. So a lot of places it's corn then soybeans and corn then soybeans, or it's corn on corn and they're just dumping more fertilizer on.
Yeah.
So this is not because Americans need to eat that stuff. The farmers love to say, we feed the world. That doesn't feed the world. The soybeans are feeding China, and some of the corn is being used for silage and for livestock feed, and that's great. But most of it is for ethanol, which is just, I mean, don't get me started. And it just, like, we're not feeding ourselves. We've become a net food importer in the last 15, 20 years.
Yeah.
Like, that we don't grow shit for ourselves anymore. And that's dangerous.
Agreed. And maybe I'm leading the witness here, but if you could redraft America's food system from the ground up with all your experience as a hunter and chef and journalist, what would it look like? Who's doing it better than the US?
Well, no, I mean, we're doing it great in pockets. But it's become it's individual farmers who are shouting against the tide. And I don't want to shit all over conventional farmers because they're trapped. Let's say I'm a big old farmer who has got a whole bunch of soybeans and corn, and I'm listening to this. I'm like, well, the first thing he's going to say is like, well, great, Hank. Where the hell am I going to get the seeds? A. B. Where am I going to sell my product?
Yep.
And C. Where am I going to get the equipment to sell my product? Everything is so specialized that to break the pattern, to break the system becomes extremely difficult and dangerous, because if I'm going to change out of my system of corn and soybeans with heavy pesticides and blah, 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 I often have to get different equipment, and I have to take a flyer. And a lot of these guys are taking $1 million operating loans out in the beginning of the year. I don't know about you, but that's real money in my world. And so if I'm going to borrow $1 million for my operating costs and bet hedge against it that I can sell all this product after the end of the year, and I'm going to change up for a better system, ooh, I mean, I might, but it's risky. So I get why they don't do it. But what would I do? I would say that soil health is more important than anything else, because farming has become, in many ways, an extractive industry where all the inputs, the inputs of our petroleum-based fertilizer and all of the equipment and what's coming out is not being eaten. So it is destroying the soil. I mean, you can lose a ton of topsoil off an acre of uncovered ground in one winter.
Yeah.
And so our soil is getting dicked up, for lack of a better term. Access to good food would be another huge thing, because this is you can get out of the farm belt for this one, like community access to good food. I mean, one of the things that I do here in St. Paul is I work at a food bank, and the idea of access to fruits and vegetables, access to meat that's not terrible, access to this stuff for people who do not make zillions of dollars a year is vital. That's a huge thing that I would change. And community gardens and urban gardens and pollinator plots. I mean, I destroyed my lawn. I had the sod completely ripped out, and I changed it to a native prairie with quite a lot of things that are edible. Now, yeah, I live on 0.12 acres, so it's a fly speck. But there's this concept of kind of the nation's national park, and there's a book about it that's really good, where if everybody just put a little bit of their own property, just you don't even have to do the whole thing, a little bit of their property back to whatever is native to where you live, it would change the entire focus of the United States. I mean, in terms of ecologically, because the pollinators would have a place to live, the birds would have, like, everything would finally have a place to live. Stop farming hedgerow to hedgerow, for the love of God.
No.
Here's a great example in California. Yolo County to the west of Sacramento doesn't. Where's the only place where you can hunt real pheasants in California? Yolo and Klamath. Two places where they don't farm hedgerow to hedgerow.
I think that's a great way to think about how hunters and environmentalists at large can be better partners in this. I think there's a long history of both groups doing a lot of work, to make sure we preserve our natural lands. And I think in a lot of states, there's a great collaboration. I feel in California, because as people get further and further away from it, I've seen this in a lot of different things. I saw it in butchery. I've seen it in healthcare. But as people get less connected to the process, or just connected to it by, 1 degree of separation from a friend or a family member, they start forgetting how important it is to preserve these things in ways that keep people using the land and watching the land and participating in the land, not just closing it off and thinking that, that it's going to be preserving it or quarantining it is the better solution. I'll probably make some enemies here with this statement, but out like in Joshua Tree, we're spending millions and millions and millions of dollars to plant new Joshua trees that are dying at a terrifying rate because of climate change. And it would be wonderful to say, hey, let's try to reverse climate change so that we can preserve this beautiful, picturesque, name-plated national park. But in the meantime, trying to fight Mother Nature by planting more plants that aren't going to survive in the mess that we've made is probably not the best use of our resources right now, when there's a lot of other things we could do to preserve and protect natural lands. I don't know what you think, but that's one of the things that I look at and scratch my head and go, wow, we could use that, $200 million in a lot better places than planting these trees that are no longer going to survive. They're going to die here in 10 years, just like the ones that died last week. What gives you hope about the future of wild food, sustainable eating, and our connection to this beautiful ecosystem we have?
I think I've seen over the course of my career, and it's now pushing 20 years now doing this. that there are more and more people of all different stripes, rural, urban, all different ethnic groups, all different political persuasions who are driven to take more control of what they feed themselves and their family. And they are asking questions, and they are willing to do what it takes to get cleaner food and to do something to create a food system that is more in line with their values. And those values are, there is a growing idea that we're overextending ourselves as a species and that more chemicals are not better. And I think there's more and more people who are not connected the way that maybe you and I are, that have an understanding of that. Maybe they're buying local. Maybe they're doing a CSA. Maybe they are making sure that they buy organic, making sure that they're composting. Maybe they have a garden in back. Um, maybe they are also volunteering at places like a food bank or places that help recent immigrants get clean and healthy food. There's a million different ways to go about it, and there's always one that suits your time and suits your means and suits your inclination. And I think more and more people are making that step and taking that step to do something.
That's beautiful, Hank. I hope folks take your words to heart, because every little bit helps. And it's amazing if we all made a concerted effort on just one or two things. I think it would have measurable results. Hank, thanks so much for joining us on Enlightened Omnivore today. Your work is a great reminder that food isn't just about flavor. It's about relationship to the land, to the animals that are on it, and to ourselves. So thanks for coming on and sharing your story.
Thanks for having me on.
And that wraps up another episode of Enlightened Omnivore. A special thanks to all my subscribers for listening in this week. You can all read more about everything omnivorous on my weekly Substack newsletter found at enlightenedomnivore.substack.com. We continue to uncover the stories behind our food and the new ways we can live sustainably together. Thank you for tuning in. This is Steve Sabaker reminding you to savor every bite and eat mindfully. Until next time, keep it balanced and stay enlightened. This is Enlightened Omnivore, everything in moderation.